Hi, this is Jennifer Stewart here, and I'm so excited to have with me today Penny Williams as part of my Peace and Joy parenting series. So Penny is an amazing one with so much knowledge and so many resources. She trains and coaches parents raising kids with ADHD and or autism. She's the parent of a son with ADHD and autism, so she's got a lot of experience. And she's the award-winning author of 4 books on parenting kids with ADHD. Boy Without Instructions, What to Expect When Parenting Children with ADHD, The Insider's Guide to ADHD, and The Hidden Layers of ADHD. And Penny is the current editor of Parenting ADHD and Autism.com. She's the founder and instructor for Parenting ADHD and Autism Academy, Mama Retreat facilitator, that sounds phenomenal, the parenting coach, and a frequent contributor on parenting and children with ADHD for ADDitude Magazine and many other parenting and special needs publications. So hi, Penny. How are you doing this morning?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm good. I'm glad to have you here. You are a wealth of knowledge with so much experience and research that you've done. So I think you're a great resource for parents that have kids with ADHD or autism or any challenging behaviors. So
Yeah.
I absolutely love how you realized at some point that it would be way better to parent your son and try to help him as opposed to trying to just fix all the problems, and instead come alongside and understand him better and try to help him thrive along with his challenges. So, and I was wondering if you could explain to parents kind of how did you come to that realization? What started you on that?
It was really hard, actually. When I started out, my son was diagnosed and we were having a lot of challenging behavior, which really started when he started school. Obviously, he had ADHD and autism before that, but we didn't really see how many differences he had from neurotypical peers until he hit a classroom. And then it was just completely obvious that something was wrong. I had the teacher call me the second day of kindergarten and say, you have to come in here this afternoon and we have to talk. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. So, and then we tried to get through that year, but nobody said, hey, there could be a learning disability. There could be a developmental disability. And so we switched schools thinking that part of it was kind of this relaxed atmosphere of a charter school. We didn't really care for some of the administrative practices. The teacher had her infant in the classroom every moment, every day, the second half of the school year, which created more of a challenge with a lot of rambunctious older kids. And so we switched. We got this great, phenomenal first grade teacher, and we had the same problems. And I thought, okay, now it's that he's not fitting for some reason. I can't blame it on any other environmental factors at that point. I can't stay in denial. I have to move forward. And so we got that diagnosis. And I think as parents, especially as moms, we want to fix things.
Right.
If there's a boo-boo, we put some Neosporin on it, we put a Band-Aid on it, and it heals. And this is not something that you can fix. This is part of who they are. And it took probably 2 to 3 years for me to realize that there was no fixing it. So I spent 2 to 3 years trying to fix it, trying to figure out how to make him pay better attention, how to make him less hyperactive, that's was my goal. And there is no way to do that. And eventually, after just consuming a ton of books and articles and stuff, I finally realized that I needed a different perspective, that I was never going to gain any traction, no matter how hard I tried, if I was just trying to fix it instead of, work with it, except that that's part of who he is. It's part of the challenges in his life. We all have them in different ways, and then move forward from that. And that created a huge shift, especially for, I think, the mental health of the entire family. We were always so stressed and struggling and feeling like a failure because we couldn't fix it. And then realizing that you don't have to, that you can't, that's really freeing.
Yeah, I think it's freeing and hard, right, as a parent, because you have to come to terms with, okay, my child is different. This is what it is. I mean, I think a lot of times parents are like, you don't want to admit that. And, but then at the same time, once you do, it's like, oh, he or
Yeah.
she doesn't have to be the same. Yeah, it's okay. They're made differently. Yeah.
I'll never forget the third grade teacher. We had a school meeting, an IEP meeting, which is the kind of special ed meeting for kids who are in special ed. And the third grade teacher, everybody kept pushing back on the accommodations and things that I was asking for. And she looked at me and she said, he's always going to struggle and you can't do anything about it. And I wasn't ready to hear it at that time. I ended up blubbering and leaving the room in the middle of the meeting because I couldn't, I just wasn't there. I wasn't there. And I think back about that now, he's in 10th grade now. And I think, she was right. She probably could have taken a more tactful, compassionate approach in the way
Right.
she said it, but she was right, that it's just part of who he is. And, when kids have challenges, things can still turn out great. There's still plenty of joy as long as you have the right mindset, as long as you're really looking at not trying to fix things, accepting, who your child really is. I think that's the biggest thing for all parents, disability or not.
Yeah.
Is, we start with this idea of what parenthood is, especially here in the US, and it's very authoritative. I call it crime and punishment. We give them the rules. If they break a rule, we punish them. And, and so
Right.
it kind of seems like that sort of system. It's very rigid and it doesn't accept differences. It doesn't have any way to really be flexible for that. So if we, start by looking at who our child really is as an individual, what is unique about them, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, not worrying about whether we're parenting like other people, whether our kids are fitting, their peers. And that's the way that you can both stay positive in your parenting, but also really succeed for your kids, really help them to find successes and have more joy. Because the other way, you're just always stuck in the negativity.
Right. No, and I think as parents, we feel a lot of judgment from others, if we're not, parenting or disciplining the way that we think others think that we should be, then we're enforcing things on our kids that are not appropriate for our children. And I love that, at least in the school systems, it sounds like you were able to, at some point, have them come alongside and create a plan to a point. Oh, I don't know, maybe not. Well, okay.
But you still try. Yes. Yeah, it's just hard.
Is he still in the public schools now?
He is. Okay. He repeated 4th grade because he was really too young to start kindergarten, but we didn't know there were any other issues at the time.
Sure.
And as the years went on, it just became really obvious that, there was just an enormous maturity gap between him and the other kids. And by giving him that extra year, we went from constant kind of bullying to he has real friends. And so it was a big deal. Academically, he didn't really need to repeat, so we had to fight for it. But so, we just continue to fight for what we feel like he needs. In high school, it's harder because you have a whole group of teachers to try to get on the same page. And at that point, teachers aren't working together in teams with certain students or anything. So that's been a real challenge, but we do the best we can, and we know that eventually that ends, and then he gets to choose what he wants to spend his time on, what he wants to study, if he wants to go to community college or, get a vocational education, whatever that may be. And, that by really accepting his truth, we were able to say, okay, this high IQ kid doesn't have to go to a 4-year college to be successful and have a happy life. You have to rewrite those expectations completely when your child doesn't quite fit the mold.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, so how do you recommend for parents that are stuck in that kind of that beginning stage, right? Like, okay, I feel like my kid's supposed to be like this. I'm supposed to parent like that. How do you make that mind shift to be okay? Like, it's okay that we're going to be different. That's the best choice. I mean, how do you?
I think it's hard, because we're programmed when we grow up. We learn what to expect of parenthood. We don't really think about it, but it gets ingrained in us from our own experiences and what we see, in our world, our friends' parents or what have you. And so it really is a process. You really have to take time to grieve if it's, a diagnosis sort of thing, a disability, and work through those emotions. It's okay to be sad that your kid is more different because it does come with more challenges. But then you have to get to a point where you say, okay, what is my goal here? My parenting goal is to help my child kind of craft this life where he can work around his challenges and use his strengths and interests and be successful. For us, successful is, independently living on his own and doing well and happy. And so you just really have to come to that point where you accept that parenting really should be different for everyone, that it really doesn't matter what you've been taught or what, your friends, the way they're parenting their kids, societal pressures, all of that. You just grow a thicker skin. You really do. You just have to say, what they think isn't important. What my child needs is what's important. Yeah. And just keep refocusing, just keep bringing yourself back to that place, because if you don't, again, you're just going to stay kind of stuck in the muck. You're in quicksand and you can't get out of it, because the more negative that you are, the more you're going to stay there. I read a psychologist recently, and I think this is a theory that a lot of psychologists talk about, but this was Dr. Dale Archer in particular. He said, do you want to be the victim or do you want to be the survivor? You have to choose. Am I going to stay stuck in that victim mentality where everything's wrong and I need to fix it, and if I can't fix it, I must be a failure as a parent? Or are you going to be optimistic and hopeful and be a survivor? And optimism, you're actually looking forward into the future. So it's pulling you forward instead of staying stuck. So it's good stuff. You just have to really practice to get to where you can use it, on a daily basis without even thinking about it.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that. And I think a lot of parents worry sometimes that if they make so many accommodations for their child when they're young, that then how in the world are they going to survive in the big world when they're grown up, because they're not, always going to be there right next to them. And so I think that's often one of the biggest, we have to make them fit into this world because this is where they're going to be.
Right. And there's teaching them to cope and to be successful in that real world, but they don't have to be the same as everybody else in order to be successful. That's kind of that, paradigm shift that we have to make in our minds, is that, that picture of success. What does that look like for your kid? It doesn't have to be what it looks like for everybody else. It doesn't have to be what it looked like for you. For me, I graduated with honors from high school. I went and got a 4-year degree. I did the track that I was taught to do. I was taught that's how you are successful. And I just had to throw that out for him. I had to say, okay, this is not a good definition of success for him. It doesn't fit, but it's okay. You just have to keep reminding yourself that it's okay to be different. It's hard, print up a poster or something, a flyer that says it's okay to be different, and put it in different places around your house, whatever you need, put it on the bathroom mirror, to just keep reminding yourself to keep your mind in that space.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, and I think that's true even for more typical kids, is everybody's different, right? And yeah, if we keep trying to make our kids be into certain molds instead of embracing them and encouraging them on their journey in general. So, I mean, this is obviously more of an extreme when you have a more challenging child. But
right.
Yeah.
But it's true for everyone. Absolutely. And that's kind of what I figured out over the years, and making this shift myself and seeing that, this really is the way we should be parenting all kids from the beginning, with more compassion and empathy and individuality, instead of trying to make them fit some mold. And they're only going to be more successful in their life later if they realize that they don't have to fit.
Yeah.
I have a daughter in college, and she stresses constantly. She has some anxiety, and she's just constantly worried about the fact that her work, she's an art major, her work isn't the same as everybody else's. And she thinks it means it's not as good as, and I'm like, it's art. It's all good. It's all in the eye of the beholder. But, that feeling for her that she needs to fit causes her a lot of stress, and we're working on it, coaching her through. I'm hoping we'll get there. But, that just, when we start when they're little and we don't give them that message at all that they have to fit, is really the best way to raise a child. I grew up with a lot of anxiety too, and I struggled. I felt like I had to fit. I had to have the same clothes, the same brands, and I had to go to the same place, as everybody else, because then they would accept me. And I started out parenting my kids that way, thinking, well, I want them to, be like everybody else. And
right.
it was a process for me to get to that point where I can say, I don't want them to be like everybody else. They don't need to be. It can be hard. It's a challenge, but I think that it's really the best way to parent every kid.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, they're predicting the future to have all these robots doing all these jobs and stuff, right? So we don't necessarily want just the kids who are like everything else. We want them to be their own creative person to shine in the world. So, I mean, I love that. I have 3 kids, and they're all totally different. Their own little people. They have the same parents, grew up in the same house, but very different, their own little unique talents and loves and challenges. And so, yeah. I love that you encourage that. And then I know you mentioned the empathy piece.
Yes.
And so how do you encourage parents to go ahead and approach it from that regard, and not feel like, I think sometimes you feel like if you don't, be tough on your kids, then you're just allowing whatever kind of behavior they want, right? There's that whole school of thought.
Yes.
So how do we make that shift and approach it with empathy?
For me, it came out of necessity and realizing that when my son was having a behavior issue, like an emotional outburst or something due to disability, but, when that was happening, we were trying to rationalize with him and, talk some sense into him, sort of.
Right.
And it didn't work. And it usually escalated the situation. And someone told me once, ask how you can help them. Instead of telling them what to do and how to feel, acknowledge how they're feeling and say, how can I help you? And it's magic. It really is. It just shifts the dynamic again. So instead of, a child super angry and refusing to do anything, and refusing to talk, and, instead of saying, you're acting like a baby, or you shouldn't feel this way, when we really minimize how our kids are feeling, when we attach our own ideas about how they should be feeling, and then they feel like their feelings, their ideas, their thoughts don't matter.
Right.
It's really kind of damaging. But again, it's not something that we're taught as parents. And so, I always, when he's having a hard time, reflect that I see how he's feeling, that I understand that, when your friend isn't nice to you, a lot of people would be angry about that. And then I say, how can I help you? And for little bitty kids, it's going to be more difficult, but starting when they're little, they'll be used to that whole pattern of working through things with you by the time that they're more capable to really give sort of realistic answers. And even if they say, well, you can't help me, then, you say, okay, well, I'm here for you and I want to help you. When you figure out if I can, you let me know, because I really want to do that for you, and leave it at that. And it takes some practice too for your child to get on board with that. When they're super emotional, they really don't want to hear a lot of logical things, right? They really can't hear them sometimes. And so that's a really big deal. And that has made a giant improvement in our house. Just a more collaborative approach, but it's very compassionate, to say, I see that you're really upset and I get it. And I'm so sad that, you're feeling bad right now. What can we do? It's just such a shift in the way that we talk to our kids. And again, it's throwing out that authoritative piece that really isn't helpful. But if I said, well, you're acting like a baby, this shouldn't have made you this upset, all it's going to do is make him more upset, right? I mean, when you think about the two different options, it's very clear when you visualize that what's going to work a lot better and what shows respect to your child. You're showing a lot of respect when you acknowledge their feelings and that they're true for them. I think
I love this approach
with tantrums, 2, 3, 4-year-olds too.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love this approach because I think that not only is it going to then encourage your child to want to cooperate, because now they realize that you do care, that their feelings matter, but it's also modeling empathy for them. And I mean, truly, we want to raise children who can go out into the world and be kind to others and be a great, contributor to society. So what better way to get them to be empathetic than to teach them that by doing it? And they're like, oh, that's how we're supposed to approach others when they're having a hard time,
Absolutely. And that's a big piece of parenting, is modeling the behavior you want from your child. If you have a frustrating situation and you're slamming doors and throwing things, they're learning that from you.
Right.
You're reinforcing that behavior. And sometimes it's hard. And, we all get angry and out of control at times to some extent, but you have to be really conscientious of that kind of thing. And they're like sponges. They're taking it in. That's something I talk about a lot with moms and self-care, is that, we are programmed again in this society to think that doing anything for ourselves as a mom is selfish, that we should give every morsel of ourselves to our children and our families. And what happens is that, we break down and we can't do the best for them anymore, and what I realized after several years was that was the message that I was giving my kids, especially my daughter, was that when you're an adult and you have a family, it doesn't matter what you want or what you need or what brings you joy anymore. You just have to give everything for kids. And, to have that shift in the way that we show them what it's like to be an adult, what it's like to be a parent, is a big deal.
Yeah, no, mommy guilt is a real thing. It's an issue. I know. I had that majorly with my first one. I think finally by the third kid, I was like, oh, I'm a better mom if I take care of myself. Imagine that.
Yeah. And that's why we do the Happy Mama Retreat every year, to teach moms why it's important and how to make it happen. Especially when you have a challenging child, it's really hard. You're more financially strapped. You have to spend more time and energy on your child day to day. And so, it is even easier for that self-care piece to get lost. And it's also easier for moms of challenging kids to have anxiety and depression and really get down. And so it's really important to focus on your own self-care. And, I always joke that even if it's not really a joke, it's true. Even if you only take 5 extra minutes in the bathroom by yourself, just to breathe and bring your mind back to where you need to be, that's self-care. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be a spa weekend, or, you don't have to spend a dime on it if you don't have any money to spend. You just have to really, be mindful of where you are and what your needs are too.
Yeah, no, I love that. Definitely. Very important. And I one of the things I wanted to ask you as well, a little bit of a shift, but so children who are challenging or have autism or ADHD often have a really hard time socially, like making friends and fitting in. And I think that's one of the biggest stressors as a parent. It's hard to watch, if your child is not able to have friends and is not getting invited to the parties and is not. So what are some of your suggestions for parents to help their kid with that?
In preschool and elementary school, it's really tough because they are put with a select group of kids. They don't meet a lot of kids outside of their class, let's say. And so, and they, if they have ADHD or autism, or maybe they're just hyperactive or really kind of boisterous, that can be really overwhelming to their peers. So it's not necessarily that they couldn't relate to each other or have things in common. It's that they just become kind of this overwhelming presence for other kids, and the kids start to back away from that. One thing I always advise parents to do is find a group, some sort of club or activity where it's something your child is really good at or passionate about, because often that similar interest is going to help to override some of the awkwardness between kids. So, if you have a quirky kid and they sign up for, Lego camp or something like that, there's typically more quirky kids and that kind of thing. And so that tends to just soften some of those issues and help them find kids outside of their classroom, their immediate sphere, where they can connect. My son didn't have real friends until he started making his group of friends in 7th grade, toward the end of 7th grade. Okay. One day he said to me in the car, I actually have real friends now, Mom. I have friends who come up to me and yell my name before I even know they're there, just because they want to talk to me. Which was heartbreaking, but so great that he finally got to that point. And when they get older, because they switch classes and they do more things with different kids within the schools, it becomes easier for them to, join after school activities or to meet the other kids who are more like them that they really can connect with. In this case, it was robotics club after school for him. The other kids who were interested in kind of science, techie stuff were there, and they really bonded, and they're still friends now in 10th grade, which is awesome. So sometimes it just takes a while, but it is heartbreaking. I mean, my son was only invited to maybe 2 birthday parties in elementary school. Most kids didn't show up for his birthday parties in elementary school. When he did go to a party, he would end up melting down for some reason or another, because sensory overwhelm and all these other things, so I never really wanted to take him to them, but I wanted him to be invited. I wanted him to feel included, Yeah. But a lot of times he really wasn't aware. And that's a big thing for parents to understand too, is a lot of times, especially preschool, early elementary, your child is not aware that they are being shunned. They don't, they just don't see it. And they're not, my son was kind of blind to when people were kind of brushing him off until probably recently. I remember in middle school being together with other boys, and they would make all these excuses about why they couldn't talk on the phone or get on a game together, which I knew were bogus, but he didn't see it because he had sort of that protection. So it's kind of bittersweet sometimes, but you really just have to work through your emotions about it. Help your child, if they're noticing and they're really struggling with it, help them find their tribe. Start going out into the community, finding things to do where there's other kids, and try to find their tribe, the kids. And the other thing too is, in public school, get the guidance counselor involved, because a lot of times they're working with several kids who have the same issue, and they can start to bring those kids together that might click and really help them with that. So there's a lot of things you can do. It doesn't really soften the heartbreak for the parent, but it does get better. It really does.
Oh, that's good to know. There's a little bit of light at the end of the long tunnel. Yeah. So, and I wanted to ask you before we got off of our chat here. So, if you could go back, to the beginning, and if you could pick like 1 or 2 things that you wish you knew in the beginning of this journey to share with parents who are just beginning to understand all this, what would that be?
That would be throw out the parenting rule book and make your own, and make sure that it's full of compassion and empathy and positive parenting. I think that's the biggest thing that I wish I knew, even in general, for both of my kids, disability aside. I really wish that I had known that this whole idea of fitting in could be more detrimental than helpful. And, woulda, coulda, shoulda. You can't really, but I do wish. And there's a book by Ross Greene called Raising Human Beings. I think every parent on the planet should read it. Read it as soon as your kid is born and use it, because it's amazing. And it's just this really empathetic, collaborative approach. And he's a behavior specialist. He works a lot with kids, with these different disabilities, behavioral disabilities.
Yeah, he's part of the series as well.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
He is my favorite. Yes, I mean, a lot of what I teach parents comes from that whole system, but that book is amazing for everyone. It just, you really teach you treat your child with that approach like a human being, an individual. They're not our mini-me's. They are their own person. They don't have to have our values, and they don't have to do things the way we do them. But that's kind of, initially what we feel like parenthood is kind of raising another version of ourselves with our values and ideals. And
I think that's part of the whole judgment thing, right? Then, because then we feel like it's a reflection of us. And so now the world is looking at a little tiny us, but yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Parenting is hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard.
It's
There's
a journey.
no doubt. It's a journey, but when you focus in certain ways, you get your mind right, it can be so much more enjoyable. Isn't that what we all want? To enjoy our kids? And when we're constantly focusing on the shoulds, there's a coach in the parenting ADHD community that always says to stop shoulding on yourself. When you're using the word should all the time, it's a huge red flag that, you're calling out your child for an expectation that probably isn't attainable for them.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, I think our time is about up here, Penny, but I am so appreciative of all the little nuggets you've shared today. I think it's going to be so great. Yeah. And so if parents want to come and learn more about all your amazing expertise and then maybe your mommy retreat or anything like that, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is just to go to parentingADHDandautism.com. Everything is linked up there. There's online classes. You can sign up for parent coaching. I have the Happy Mama Retreat, and also I do a Purposeful Parent Boot Camp. And I'm sure there's other things. There's lots of free resources there as well, but everything is linked there.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.